I think that might be the wrong week.
What?
We're live.
No. It's working for Mary.
We're live on YouTube now.
Okay. Okay, I just got a text from someone who said it's looking good. So, all right, let's get started.
Okay.
Dr. Simmons.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Greetings of peace and wellness to all of the members of our community who have joined us this evening for this community forum on rezoning in our Alachua County schools. I'm Dr. Gwendolyn Zohara Simmons, a retired professor from UF, a community organizer, and long-term civil rights activist. And I'm happy to serve as the moderator for what the organizers of this community forum plan on being the first of several events addressing the issue of school rezoning in our county. The organizations that are sponsoring this event are the Alachua County NAACP, the Racial Justice Program of UCG, United Church of Gainesville, the Gator or UF chapter of the NAACP, and the African American History Task Force. As I'm sure you know, rezoning is a sensitive issue, one that has not been addressed previously, though the problems we face in our schools related to racial disparities and rural-urban disparities are immense. These are compounded by racial economic disparities and racial segregation, housing segregation in Alachua County. So this and subsequent community forums on this issue are being held to educate the whole community on the need for rezoning and the process that our school board and our superintendent will be involved in, along with yourselves, for making a rezoning plan. Through forums and other events that you'll hear more about from our panelists, we hope to build community-wide support for our school board and our superintendent as they work with parents, students, and the community at large on the best way to do it. There is no plan in place. We are at the beginning stages of this process in which parents, community members, and leaders are being asked to contribute. Again, thank you for being here this evening, and welcome to everyone. I will begin by introducing our first panelist, Jackie Davis, who is one of the principal organizers, along with Nkwanda Ja, for this forum. Jackie is an active community organizer on education, racial, and economic justice issues. She is former chair of the United Church of Gainesville's Racial Justice Task Force and a current member, as well as a member of the Alachua County NAACP and active with the Alachua County Remembrance Project. Jackie will give us an overview and a timeline of the history of rezoning in Alachua County. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. First, I want to thank all the panelists so much for participating in this forum, and also to thank Marvin Wilson, who is doing our tech, and also to thank all of you, the community, who are watching this tonight. We really appreciate your interest in this such an important topic. The plan, originally I had planned for, and I had arranged for Dr. Martinelli, Amy Martinelli, to speak about the history of rezoning. She emailed me yesterday and said she would be unable to participate. And I tried to find someone else with more education about this than me and was unable to with such short notice. So I am pinch hitting right now, and I'm just filling in all of the information I have about the history of rezoning in Alachua County. I have learned in the last month while in Quandaja and I were organizing this, and I've learned it from speaking with people who work for the Alachua County School Board. So I'm going to give you just kind of a bare bones outline of the history of rezoning in Alachua County as I understand it. So, and I have to use my notes because I didn't know I was doing this today until yesterday. So prior to the 1960s, of course, all the schools were segregated. Black children of all incomes went to Black schools and white children to white schools. At that time, the teachers were predominant in Black schools were predominantly Black, and in white schools they were white. And of course, as we know about the Jim Crow era, the Black schools got the hand-me-down desks and books and other things from the white schools. Early in the 1960s, the federal government mandated that they mandated in 1954, but we began in the early 1960s busing for racial integration because it was mandated by the federal government. As part of this, Lincoln High School was closed in 1970. Many people know more about this than I do, but I think this was a huge blow to the Black community, as this was a place of pride for their team and their band and everything else. It was reopened as a middle school in 1973. So busing happened until the early 1980s. In the early 1980s, the federal government made a decision called Unity, and they said that busing would no longer be mandated. So Alachua County Schools rezoned at that time to a neighborhood model. Of course, because kids were not being bused, schools became increasingly segregated, both by race and by economic status. West Gainesville schools began having problems with overcrowding, and East Gainesville schools began having problems with empty seats. And we didn't grade schools until the 1990s, but what I have heard from my sources who were educating me about this is that the schools were more equal until this happened. And as the schools became more segregated, both by race and economic status, they became less equal. Also in the 80s, they created magnet programs. They were placed in East Gainesville schools to try to address both the overcrowding issue and the racial segregation issue, to put more white kids into East schools and to alleviate the overcrowding in the West Gainesville schools. They started with the high schools, and the first IB class was started in 1983, and they graduated in 1987. And gradually, they increased the number of magnet programs. They included middle schools in the mid-90s. Research has shown that tracking programs like magnet schools that put some children in a track for, higher, and other kids in regular programs, that magnet programs and tracking programs increase educational inequality. The next time we rezoned was in 2003. This was done, I believe, because there were new schools that opened, like Child's Elementary School. So rezoning was necessary to fill that school. And it was also done in an attempt to address the overcrowding in West Gainesville schools. They additionally began putting magnet schools in the elementary schools in 2003. Here in Alachua County, the median income for white people is $51,000, and the median income for Black people is $26,000. So economic status cannot be separated from race. When people talk about Title I schools, this is code for poor and Black. When the test scores are disaggregated by race, Alachua County has the widest achievement gap or opportunity gap, which means our white students are all scoring above the state average and our Black students score below the state average. And we have the widest gap in scores. Today I was talking to someone about this and she said, well, it's just because we have so many academic parents and our white students score higher than most white students in the state. But this, when you disaggregate that and when you just compare Black students in Alachua County with Black students in every other county in Florida, our students score the worst in math, science, and language arts. And the only place where we don't is social studies. And that's just comparing Black students to Black students. And we're talking counties like Dixie County, Putnam. Those Black students score better than our students. So it's difficult to understand why this is happening. Our achievement gap or opportunity gap ranges from 40 to 49 points between the average score of Black students and the average score of white students. The state average is 24 to 32. So ours is 40 to 49, depending on the subject, and the state is 24 to 32. And our statistics have not changed over the last 5 years. Statistics for Black students in other counties have gotten better over the last 5 years, but not ours. And of course, this is based on the last time we tested, which was the year before the pandemic, in 2018-19. So, when children living in poverty are concentrated in one school, the problems are magnified. It's more difficult to teach children who are dealing with adverse childhood events. Yet often, because there's a higher turnover in the schools in East Gainesville, they get newly graduated students or have long-term substitutes. So sometimes it seems like classes with the most difficult classroom management have the least experienced teachers. This inequities are also exacerbated by the fact that schools in West Gainesville and wealthy affluent neighborhoods have active PTAs that supplement things like playground equipment and other school supplies, whereas schools, Title I schools, which are poor and Black schools in East Gainesville, do not have active PTAs. Rezoning is never popular. No one ever likes to change their kid's school. And so I just want to really say I am so impressed by our superintendent and our school board for being courageous enough to tackle this issue that hasn't been done really since we quit doing busing. It hasn't been adequately addressed since the 1980s when we quit doing busing. So I just can't say enough about how much I admire the courage of our school board and our superintendent for addressing this issue. And I think that what we need to do as a community is learn as much as we can about this so we can support their decisions. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you so much, Jackie. And if people have questions, I understand you can write them. And we do have a person monitoring those who will share the questions with us. Our second speaker.
I just want to say, write them on the YouTube. Yeah, and someone will come and bring them to me.
Yes, I assumed that everybody was on YouTube and would know that, but thank you. Our second speaker, representing East Gainesville parents, is Mr. Courtney Scott. Mr. Scott is a husband and father of two. He is the current vice president of Lake Forest Farms Homeowners Association. He is an electrician and electronics engineer, and he is a board member of the Fifth Avenue Arts Festival. Thank you, Courtney Scott, for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. And thank you to all my panelists. I'd also like to say thank you to the organizers of this event. As a parent of two children who go to Alachua County schools, I think it's important that we have discussions like this so that not only my kids, but all kids can get a opportunity at a fresh start at the world with their education. A little bit about me. I moved to East Gainesville about 15 years ago. I was not married. I did not have kids, and I did not even think about Alachua County schools. I was just a young man. But as time went, and I moved to East University, Lake Road area, as some of you may know, to Lake Forest Farms, right across the street from Lake Forest Elementary. And we had little people, and they started to grow, and it was time for them to go to elementary school. And that's when we were introduced to the situation here in Alachua County. At that time, my son is 7, so this would have been about, no, he's 10. This would have been about 10 years ago. Lake Forest Farms, I believe, was a D or an F school. Very low, very low. And I found this quite alarming. Um, but so that's where I'll enter into this. A lot of parents that I spoke to at that time were doing something known as school choice. This is a type of micro rezoning where a parent can go to, it was at the time called Kirby Smith, the school board building, and say, hey, is there another location that has less numbers so I can drive my child to a school, because the school in my neighborhood, the neighborhood method that we use, is failing or underperforming. And a lot of parents in my community had done that. And my question is, in this rezoning, are we trying to make all schools, including the East Gainesville schools, good enough to where parents would want a school choice to our schools versus rezoning, which is making them have to bring their children to our schools? As an East Gainesville parent, I would like to see our schools top notch so that we would not have to get school choices and stuff to send our kids or drive them way across town. I see how the concept of rezoning can bring in more bodies and more resources, but just at the beginning of the conversation, I would like to say that we would love to see our schools brought up to a level to where they were attractive to parents to want to say, hey, I want my child to go to Lake Forest. I'll drive them to East Gainesville to go to school, versus having to do a legislature type thing with rezoning and pulling teeth with certain people to make them get their kids in our area. Now, some of the things that I would also like to discuss, I'm not sure if they're in league with rezoning, and I hope that the discussion moving forward with rezoning will adjust them. Resources would be one of them. Like Ms. Davis just said, a lot of teachers that are going to the East Gainesville schools are new teachers, are they have a high turnover rate, and I don't know what the causes are of that, but with that being said, if we're in an area where there's a high achievement gap, it almost seems like we would want to put our more tenured, seasoned, and skilled teachers in those areas versus putting a green teacher in a frying pan, to say, because they're going to be dealing with things that the textbooks can't teach you, where we could have these seasoned teachers who have dealt with these things in the past come and shine some of that light in our East Gainesville classrooms. Another thing is transparency of how the funds are being spent. It almost seems like in rezoning, we are shifting kids to shift resources. My question is how are the resources currently being used? Are the schools in East Gainesville experiencing equality? And if they are, is that leading to equity? Because sometimes you can put the same amount of uh, resources into a situation, but if different places are starting from different starting points, if you give 10, 10, and 10, but we're starting from different starting points, if you're starting from 20 and you get 10, you're at 30. If I'm starting from 2 and I get 10, I'm at 12. So that's another thing I like to put out there. Go to my notes. Now, also, with the rezoning, how is it going to address the failing schools? It was also mentioned that there are a lot of magnet programs in East Gainesville, and I don't want to misrepresent the feelings of any East Gainesville parents, but it almost seems like the magnet programs themselves are a little segregated. Because a lot of parents will school choice to Williams or Eastside to get their kid in the magnet program, and that's it. And then those kids are in what I've been told is like a school within a school. Do those uh, magnet program kids interact with the regular curriculum kids to interact and encourage them? And you see what I'm saying? Or is it just a situation to where they go to school, go to their little sector behind a closed door, and that's really like two different schools? So it's only really like blending them on the surface and segregating them on the inside. Another topic I would like to touch on, and let me know if I go too long, is busing. Uh, and I would leave this one open to more parents of East Gainesville, but I know just in general, it's easier when your child attends school close to home, just because if you miss the bus and you don't have a car, then how do you get to school? Especially during times of COVID when you don't want to taxi, Uber, or take a public bus. uh, Transfer students. Again, I don't know if this deals with zoning, but it's a type of micro zoning itself, because a lot of students in East Gainesville are transferred out to other schools. I know quite a few parents who their children in elementary school went to like Glen Springs or something like that, and that pulls resources from East Gainesville in multiple ways. Now, I think maybe rezoning could help with that, because you'd be bringing people into East Gainesville. Maybe some of the parents who have been on PTAs at other school could come in and help build some of those things up in East Gainesville. But again, we want East Gainesville to be great on its own foundation, so that if this was zoned back in 5 years, East Gainesville schools would not slip back below the achievement gap if rezoning does in fact raise it up. And my last thing I would like to end with is a personal experience. I myself was in middle school and high school in the 1990s. I graduated in 2001. And in my middle school experience and my high school experience, I'm from Manatee County. Manatee County did rezoning, and they pretty much, if you were in West Bradenton, you went to schools in East Bradenton and vice versa. So when I was in middle school, I went to sixth grade, and a lot of kids from West Bradenton were bused to our school. Now, to appease the parents, Manatee County built a brand new middle school for those kids to go to. So that's how we got our resources. They rezoned us, and then they built a brand new middle school, Louise R. Johnson Middle School. And I was the first graduating class. And in high school, I was bused to West Bradenton, to Manatee High School, and my experience was it was beneficial. I did meet people who I would not have normally met. I did experience things that I would not have normally experienced, and I made relationships that still help me to this day in my life. So I am not against rezoning. I am not against busing, and I don't feel like East Gainesville parents are either. But I do know that we want our schools to be strong. We want our schools to be attractive to us as parents and to other people. If they're moving to Gainesville, in Gainesville, word of mouth on Facebook, I always hear parents asking, "Hey, I'm moving to Gainesville. Where's a good place to move to be in a good school district?" And I never hear East Gainesville brought up. And as an East Gainesville parent, when that question is asked, I want East Gainesville to be right up there with West Gainesville, Northwest Gainesville, and Southwest Gainesville.
Thank you. Have you completed? I didn't mean to cut
Oh,
you off.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm
No.
done. And thank you guys and everybody for allowing me the opportunity to speak today and represent East Gainesville.
Well, thank you so much for those excellent questions. And Dr. Carly Simon, who is our school superintendent, has agreed to speak to some of the questions you raised.
So, Mr. Scott, thank you for your questions. I tried to copy down as many notes as possible, and so I'm hoping I address a good chunk of them, but I know that there were a few that while I was writing, they probably slipped by me, but I'll do my best to kind of give some reaction. So I think the first question you asked is, are we making all schools high performing, or is that the goal? And I can tell you now, yes, that's exactly the goal. I mean, I look at it in how we fund education, and, you know, everybody in this county has contributed to the education system, and everybody in this county should have an expectation that high quality education is going to be provided to their children. As just a model of following efficiency of human resources, our facilities, our capital, as well as any of our general fund funding, it is best that all of our schools are high quality and offering education experiences that serve our community. And I think it's actually, for me, it's a fundamental value system that would be the goal of this experience. And so that's one of the things that I really want us to focus on when we do our community engagement and our listening sessions and our planning, is that's really kind of, that's where we're starting the discussions. Now, what does that look like? That's where we're going to start to, you know, have some more in depth. But the expectation that all of our schools in our community are high quality is a very acceptable and reasonable expectation, not only of families and the children, but of the people who work in these schools, as well as people who just have these schools within their community, because we all know that high quality schools serve our communities beyond the building walls of that actual school. You asked about resources, and yeah, what we tend to have in this situation, and this is something that my background is education finance, and so I'm very concerned with how we spend our money and how we allocate our resources. And I do really appreciate your discussion of equity versus equality, because we are well aware that certain students need certain things, and they may not be the exact same things. And in order for us to serve our children well, is to understand that our children are different and they have different needs and different backgrounds. And that means we're going to have to allocate resources differently. One of the things that I would like to focus on while I'm serving as superintendent, especially after this rezoning is completed and we've really started to put things in place, your question about the transparency. What I would like to do is have a dashboard on every school website that talks about funding, so people actually know the information. It's right there. I think it would be quite helpful if we even had ways where you could compare what's going on. Information is power and important, and I think everybody needs to have this access. And so that is a goal that I have, is to make sure that we have this type of interaction and accessibility of information. Let's see, the resources with teachers and why teachers are at certain locations. That's another very serious concern, because right now, unfortunately, we seem to have a system that does allow for our newer teachers, who also happen to be our, well, things have kind of modified with the governor's requirement to change the pay, but many new teachers start at lower salaries because they've entered the market. But again, the governor has changed that, so that's made this year a little bit different. But what we need to have is our high quality teachers are serving our students, and especially our students who are going to need more classroom management skills, more experience. That's important, and we need to look at that. And so these are things that I also am intending to address, is making sure that we have you know, new teachers that need to be trained by experienced teachers in the same building, because that's how we transfer knowledge, that's how we build our bench. And I think that's important. And I will say that goes directly into also leadership, and I find it incredibly important. High level leadership in every one of our schools is something that I know needs to be addressed, and make sure that all of our schools have strong leaders, because strong leaders build strong teams, and strong teams take care of children. And so these are the things that we're going to be focusing on as well in all of this. I think we have some leaders in our district that are very well in this position. I also am interested in recruiting leaders from other areas to help address needs that we have, because again, we need to build our team and we need that strength and leadership. The magnet programs, my value system is that we have whole school magnets. When we have magnets nested within schools, I think you are correct that we run into serious inequities. I was a child who attended one of these magnet schools nested within a regular traditional school model, and the inequity was very apparent. It was clear, everyone saw it, kids knew it, and that's just not acceptable. And I don't think that this is something that we should expose children to. So my goal is whole school magnets. I think we can do it. And I think we can do it in really all of the content that we cover, because everybody should be entitled to have the opportunity to seek knowledge and to grow. Busing is it's always an issue. Busing is an issue because we also are a county-wide school district, which means we cover a lot of ground. And so we do need to come up with some solutions for this. And I think I am not in favor of busing people across the county. I don't know about you all, but I hate driving. And so, I don't want to do it to anybody else. And we have to find some solutions. And I think we can. It's just going to take some problem solving and not going and doing the same old thing that we've done for the last, I'm like 40 or 50, 60 years, it's been a long time. And then the other thing that I'm very excited about is I can't resolve the inequities in our education system as the superintendent of the district on my own. The way to address the inequities in our community is I have to collaborate across governments. That means I'm working with the city, I'm working with the county, I'm working with other municipalities in this county, and I'm talking to them about how we solve these problems, because I see this as housing, transportation, healthcare, access to high quality food, access to your work. I mean, all of these things come together. And so I can't do it alone. And this is one of the reasons why I'm in this forum, I need to build a group of people who are interested in resolving this situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simon. The next speaker representing West Gainesville parents is Ms. Lindsay Lugren. Ms. Lugren is a 2008 graduate of the University of Florida's Art Education Program with 12 years of teaching experience, 8 within Alachua County at Buchholz High School. She is a mother of 3 children. Her school-age children are currently enrolled at Hidden Oak Elementary. Thank you so much for agreeing to be with us.
Thank you so much. Good evening to you all, and I'm, proud to speak for West Gainesville parents. First, just a little bit about myself. As was stated, I'm a mom of 3 kids, and for me, for them to attend school, I want them to be in a school that's representative of the broader community. I want them to learn empathy and from people who are not like them, and to learn the value of every person in their classroom, school, and greater community. And I would like to see that within schools throughout this district, West Gainesville, East Gainesville, and throughout the county as a whole. In addition to being a mom, I'm also a teacher. And just as I advocate for my own children, I will advocate for my school babies as well. And I am not on board with anything or any plan that seeks to keep certain groups of students outside of the school based on their demographic and who they are. So I want to be very clear that, I, as an art educator, have the opportunity and pleasure. Is one of the classrooms where you do have a mixture of every type of student. I have 9th graders through 12th graders. I have the valedictorian and lower functioning ESC students. I have students from every demographic mixed together. I think parents oftentimes are apprehensive and concerned. How will my child deal with being around someone different? How will they learn? Will this be distracting? And I think I see every day how well students can learn in an environment with people who are not like them, and how much they grow because of that experience. So I absolutely want to see that broader in our school, in our district, and across the board. But I do, of course, want to represent all of the West Gainesville parent concerns. First, I want to say I spoke with parents individually, but I also did kind of a brief survey. I wanted to make sure I was speaking to people beyond my own group. I didn't want to have just an echo chamber. I wanted to get a more broad glance of what people were thinking and feeling. And some of their concerns were things I had not considered on my own. So I was glad that I kind of sought feedback in that way. West Gainesville parents are very proud of their schools. They're really proud of what they've invested in their community, and they don't want to move schools. They don't want to move a school to a school. They want to be right where they are. They are just really happy and settled in. For the most part, I didn't see evidence that people wanted to keep other students out of their school. They're happy to share. They just don't want to have to themselves move their child from this school to that school. So I saw that by and large that, ideally they would not have their child transfer schools. The top concern that I saw over and over and over was citing loss of home value if they suddenly went from an A school where they bought their home to a lower grade school. Concerns about travel distance if they were having to go to a different school were also cited by and large. Concerns about loss of magnet programs if those were to go away was another common West Gainesville concern that I saw cited as well. But by and large, West Side parents are very happy with their schools, and they are concerned about diverting resources when appropriate to help improve other schools within the district as well. So that is something that I saw noted again and again, that we should make sure that we're bridging this equity gap. We should make sure to increase diversity. We should make sure that we're doing these things that we know are best for students. I think a lot of West Gainesville parents actively want to see East Gainesville schools improve, but maybe don't necessarily know how, as a West Gainesville parent, they can do that kind of individually and personally as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think you had a specific question, and of course, Dr. Simon is going to be our closing speaker. So unless you have some question you want to direct to her, we'll move on to our next panelist. Is that okay, Ms. Libgren?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Our next speaker is representing rural Alachua parents, and that is Ms. Jacqueline Randall. Ms. Randall is a city commissioner in Hawthorne. She also serves as the current president of the PTA at Hawthorne High School. Ms. Randall is a lifelong resident of Alachua County with strong family ties to our community. Welcome, Ms. Randall.
Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here to be a voice for the rural schools. I take it as a complete honor. And I will just read what I have written out. I would like to start by saying thank you to SBAC and staff for answering the call. The call that for years have been given very little attention. From the rural community standpoint, it's my belief that the number one fear is possibly losing more children or even school closure. We fight to keep the kids zoned to our area due to poor school grading, which in turn is mostly due to lack of proper allocation of resources. We have all witnessed the crippling effect the closing of the school in Waldo had on its community. So needless to say, our rural communities stand guard against that happening to us. Now let's talk about Hawthorne. Hawthorne also has answered the call. Just 3 years ago, when we were faced with closure, we answered that call. We received an extensive task from the district, a to-do list that many thought it was impossible to complete. We certainly didn't have time on our side, but the community rolled up their sleeves and we put our thoughts together to come up with a plan that we now so affectionately hashtag all in to keep our school open. Not only did we answer the call, we also left a voicemail for others to see nothing is impossible with proper resources. And we thank Dr. McNeely for working at the district level tirelessly on our behalf and hard work when given a chance. We now offer an Ag Magnet program that has been booked and busy even before we received an acceptance letter from the district. We also have went on to become state champs with both our boys and girls basketball teams. And we're looking to make big strides in our academic sector in the years ahead. I'm a proud product of a rural school in this district, and that's where I hang my hope at. It's also where I pull my strength to keep advocating for the rural communities. Rezoning shouldn't act as a solution to the real problem, which is giving too much needed attention to bringing and maintaining resources that have been allocated to other schools throughout the district, to rural schools. We tend to be the least thought of when zoning, administrative placement, and budgetary discussions are had. However, I'm hopeful that as with this rezoning, communities will continue to have representation in all future initiatives. I keep mentioning proper resources because it is my belief that in doing the work there, you'll see more families enrolling in the near schools, which would generate a decrease in requests for zoning exemptions. Overall, rural schools are not opposed to the district's rezoning, as we understand the base of what the district is trying to achieve here. I was able to get feedback from a few parents in Hawthorne area, as well as PTA leadership from Alachua and High Springs. The list of concerns and questions are as follows. Alachua's question was, will rezoning affect us all? It is their understanding with them being located so far out, they wouldn't be affected at all by this rezoning. Some of Hawthorne's concerns are possible crippling to our enrollment numbers. How would that be addressed? Transportation to Hawthorne and distances to travel to other schools. How is that being addressed? The quality of children's education on the east side of the county. What's the plan? Concern with possible loss of programs and activities. There was a significant concern on that subject. Lastly, parents in Hawthorne expressed their hope for the rezoning to see the district do what's best for all kids and not favor certain sides of the county, and that there's more diverse students be zoned to the west side schools. Some of High Spring questions are as follows. High Spring is a unique city within Alachua County. It shares 2 other counties within the city. Will the district rezoning only affect students that live within the Alachua County line of the city? For those with area exceptions, rezoning means will they need to go to the school in that particular area that they're zoned in. With Hot Springs Community School already overcrowded, why are more zoning exceptions being given out? With at least 3 developers coming to Hot Springs to build homes, and the fact that there's no seat available at Hot Springs Community School, they're already at capacity. Will the school board be looking to build a new school? Will they separate the school to become a separate elementary and middle school? And the last question was, Mr. Tillman was approached about land previously offered for a school, but the school board refused. Is there any update as to why? There's an overall sense of staying put in it with the request to receive the needed resources for each school. I believe in doing this, we will see a settling throughout the district, especially in the rural areas. Parents' number one concern and reason for rezoning is to give their child a better educational opportunity. And my question is always, why they can't receive that same opportunity at their zone schools. As a representative of the rural schools, I sincerely say thank you for giving us the opportunity to express our concerns. I'm hopeful that the district will continue to include parents and each community in upcoming projects to help create a better educational institution district-wide. As we like to say here in the great city of Hawthorne, we are better together and we're all in. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Randall. Our final speaker, who I know will address some of your questions, is Dr. Carly Simon, who's already spoken, but I didn't really give her an introduction. Dr. Simon is the Alachua County Public Schools Superintendent. She has significant experience in educational leadership, school finance, and infrastructure at the local, state, and national level. She has shared her expertise in equity, funding, school law, and many other issues as an educator, consultant, presenter, and published author. She has received several awards and honors from state and national organizations for her work. And she is an invited guest to this forum, and we greatly appreciate you being willing to come and be grilled by our panelists. Thank you so much, Dr. Simon.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. So again, I had a lot of information kind of asked, and so I will try my best to address it. I also have some things to share to kind of get people to understand what we're wrestling with. So we'll start with Lindsay's points. So I do believe, and I appreciate you pointing this out, that I believe that everybody in our community is really interested in having schools that have equity within the school and there's diversity within the school. And I think that that's definitely an acknowledged component as well as appreciated, because I think that that's important for all of us. And that is my goal. And I think that's the goal of many other people within the district office who are interested in taking on this rezoning and be successful. I agree, or I want to also point out that I think that, and this is something that I had in Cincinnati quite a bit, when we would run into situations like these types of intersections of communities and cultures and backgrounds and all of that, you know, there's something, this is an unwritten curriculum in our education system. And I think it's pretty important for us to acknowledge that when we have diverse perspectives and we're all coming together, that will make us more whole, better people, because we understand that, you know, there's multiple lenses to see our world. So I look as a parent appreciating diverse backgrounds, and I think it's pretty important that we make sure that we provide that to all of our students. I do appreciate as well that we have many people, and it's not just West Side families, it's actually across the county. We have people who are very proud of their public education schools. And I think that that's incredible. And I think it's something that we can really focus on and capitalize on, because I do believe that we have a strong group of people who believe public education is important, and actually the experience that their children are having, many appreciate it and value it. And so that's a good place to start from. It's interesting, and I will talk about this discussion about how some families on the West Side feel very settled and they don't want to move. Because when I talk about Jacqueline Randall's components, I think we'll get into why this gets a little more complicated, because especially as the city grows, you know, who's here the longest does that kind of state claim on residents, and specifically in the West Side community, because, you know, I grew up here in Gainesville, and there wasn't a Hale when I was a kid. That kind of came later in the game. And now there's an Oakmont, and, you know, so it's kind of like, especially going out west, we're getting new communities. And so, you know, who was here first and who has claim to the school, and schools only allow a certain number of bodies to fill the building, and then we have an issue. But again, I'll get to that. So, and loss of the home value with school grades, you know, this is one of those problems with school grades. Obviously, we want to know how our students are performing. We want accountability. We think it's important for teachers to deliver high quality, and we want to know how to measure it. These school grades have, though, created a lot of consequences socially in our community. And a big one is we've made decisions and we base everything on this grade, which, interestingly enough, research proves that using the letter grade is actually detrimental to how schools are performed. They like to look at a performance index grade better, but interestingly enough, that's not how our government is grading our schools. We also know that we have real estate and businesses, and specifically real estate, where we can go around and see that, you know, you have this A-rated zone or school zone. But school zones they do shift. I mean, it hasn't shifted much here in this county, but that's a thing, is that schools get rezoned. And so it's hard to say that this house actually belongs to that school zone. It's also unfortunate that when we have these discussions of improving the equity within our schools, that the worry of a school grade dropping the value of a home is a concern. And I'm not saying that it's not a reasonable or practical or justified worry. I think it's just a sad state of where we are. The travel distance, I think everybody has that. I told you I don't like driving. And a big part of it too is that the traffic is so bad. It's not necessarily how far I'm going. And loss of magnet programs. I'm not interested, and I don't think anybody is, that in the talks that I've been having with people, of getting rid of magnet programs. Maybe how the magnet program looks, maybe what's being delivered. And I do know I had a few questions from the community through the YouTube chat of what do I mean by a whole school magnet? What I mean is that school, the entire school will offer that curriculum. So I'm meaning that, so in Cincinnati, we had whole school Montessori. The entire school was a Montessori curriculum. Every single child got to have that opportunity, instead of having like a Montessori wing of a building. So that's what I'm interested with the whole school magnets. And so for Ms. Randall's components, because this is a countywide school district, I think it would be absolutely problematic on so many levels to only have schools within like the large city or something like that. I think it's important for us to have schools in our communities, because I do believe, and this is like an urban planning kind of value system, all of our communities, large communities, small communities, you know, the school is an anchor. It's a very important part of the community. And so I think we need to figure out how to resolve this without shutting down any of our schools in the rural communities. So let me see, for Alachua, I guess the question was, will it affect us because we're in Alachua? Actually, yes, it's going to. So one of the big things that we have a concern with is that our schools need to be K-5 in the elementary school. And that has a lot to do with student performance, and it goes back into those school grades and how that affects communities. And so one of the discussions that we are talking about internally is that all of our schools need to be K-5. That's an equity concern, that's a performance concern. It's actually good for the children to have a K-5 education system, and that's really what drives it all down. You know, when it boils all down to it, is this good for kids? Yes, then that's what we need to do. Alachua does have schools that are not K-5, and so it will be a part of it. This is going to be countywide. But rezoning is actually a word I'm trying to kind of pull us away from. We are reimagining. We are reimagining how our school system is serving our community. Hawthorne, transportation, yeah, it's the same thing. We all have these concerns, and these are things that we will have to make sure we address. And like I said, I am very interested in making sure that our rural communities keep their schools. Quality of education is also very important. And again, back to what Mr. Scott had brought up previously, I think it's absolutely imperative that we have high quality instruction at all of our schools. It shouldn't be only offered in a certain select few. That is not acceptable. Loss of programs and activities, I'd say that probably goes into how our funding's allocated and utilized. And so I do think that that's something we'll be focusing on as well. And as I'm talking about funding, I think it's also very important, especially when we talk about quality education. Money matters, and actually how you use your money matters even more. And we can invest in things that have a huge return on the investment, and we can also invest in things that are total loss. And so how we decide to spend our money is going to matter quite a bit in this. And that's why I do believe that we put our money in high quality programs. We put our money in people. We put our money in systems that we know have a guaranteed return on the investment. And that includes also like facilities and all of those components. For High Springs, so as far as the intersection of the county lines, I mean, I only have powers and controls over Alachua County. So if it's in Alachua County, then there's some level of influence. If it's anywhere out of there, not really at all. So the community school, as far as people getting zoning exemptions into going into the community school, I would have to look at that, because I agree that school is very much overflowed. So if that is happening, I need to confirm and address, because, well, yeah, overcrowded schools are a problem. And so then that gets into the next question about the developers. So I did go to High Springs, and I did talk to the High Springs city commissioners, because there is a development that was brought that was for 2,500 houses. And we went to go and speak with them, because that's off the top of my head, I think that's like 350 elementary school kids. I think it's like 150 middle and 200 high schoolers. Well, 350 elementary school kids is half of an elementary school. And the landowner had allocated 12 acres of land to put a school site on. And so we did go to High Springs, and we did explain to them the complications of this, because in order to build an elementary school, we needed roughly 25 acres of land. So 12 acres of land won't make that work. On top of needing 25 acres of land, we also need to fund it, which would be a $30 million structure. And so I think we get into this situation, and this is one of the complications on the west side of the community. And we're going around, actually, we're talking to all of these communities, that when development is continued on and the student population is not necessarily increasing because people are just moving around the community, what we end up having is, I don't think it is I don't think when we talk about how we spend our money, I do not think it is a good idea for us to spend money to follow migratory patterns of residents within the county. And so we may have a burst of population on the west side, but, and I have slides I can share actually on this. We have capacity in this district. We actually do not need to.
Dr. Simon, you're muted.
I apologize. I don't know how that happened. So this is a map of the elementary schools. And if it's red, that means the schools are at capacity. If it's green, that means that there is some room. And so this is how our middle schools look. And this is how our high schools look. And just so you know, currently right now in elementary schools, our county has 1,800 seats. So, I mean, building a school when we have 1,800 seats, I think we have to talk about, you know, taxpayer money and where we're putting it. Because when we have too many facilities, those general funds that we utilize to operate our schools are not being used to educate our children. And it's something that we have to have some serious discussions about. And this is one of the reasons why I want us to have these listening sessions, is because it's not an easy thing to resolve. As we've discussed at the beginning of this presentation, I mean, rezoning has been something that's been put off for a very long time because it's a complicated situation. But I do think it's important for people to understand where it is. So technically, in our county right now, we have 4,500 seats for students. So when we discuss building schools, we should be asking ourselves why. And then I also wanted to share this slide, just because I think this is something I want people to just start to memorize. For an elementary school, you need 25 acres of land, roughly $35 million. For a middle school, you need 35 acres of land, roughly $45 million. And for a high school, you need 65 acres of land and roughly $70 million. And so when we talk about building a school, I mean, I think it's important for us to talk about like what that means and where the monies are going. Because the other thing is, and I'm going to go back to Ms. Randall, Hawthorne schools need significant support and facilities. Just to fix the roof and the air conditioner system on the main building is $5.5 million. We have done nothing regarding the aesthetics. We have done nothing regarding plumbing. We have done nothing regarding the quality of the other buildings. But that's $5.5 million, and that's a high school. And so then to build a brand new high school on another side of the community for $70 million when we still have seats, I mean, these are the things we have to discuss, because I believe you're right. The community of Hawthorne has contributed to the tax base. The community of Hawthorne has contributed to the school facilities tax. The community of Hawthorne should be able to also benefit from the Hassan sales tax. And I think these are the things that we need to talk about, and we need to ensure that we are taking care of everybody in this community. That again then goes into the other component, and one of the problems that we have. I told you we have 4,000 empty seats. Well, that means we also have empty seats, and one of our issues is under enrollment on the east side schools. And when we have an under enrollment, we run into a few things. We have a huge amount of inequity. One, we are spending more money on that child because of the cost of the facility. Operating a school half enrolled means we are not getting out of this building all of it. The other thing that we run into is when you have a smaller student population, when it comes to these performance tests, it's much easier to have a shift in performance because you have fewer students. So when you have larger students and there are concerns, those larger students, when you get into just how the performance data is averaging out, it's less detrimental. So when we have smaller populations, our schools are even more vulnerable. And then of course, it's kind of the, the cyclical thing of, well, small enrollment, school doesn't perform well. Well, guess the enrollment gets even smaller in the school. It's kind of one of those situations. And so we do have to resolve it. There are things, so I feel like I've given like a whole bunch of bad news, and I do apologize. I will say I'm really hopeful. I think that there's a lot going on right now. So we have a board that's been courageous enough to say, you know what, let's do this. The work needs to be done. This is not going to be a pleasant experience, but we need to do this. And I'm willing to go down this path too. And I think that that's important. So we kind of have some, unity. I think I will tell you with my staff, I think everybody's very interested in this. People they want to solve this problem. They see it, they know they want to. And I'll tell you, just the fact that we have will to do this is a huge win for everyone. I think there's also many opportunities with the half-cent sales tax because it has now put some money into our facilities, which, like I said, I grew up here, and I can tell you now, many of these schools look the same way they did when I went to school, and it's been a while. So this is something that, we've been needing for a long time. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take, we need more because, we're talking about 40, 50 years of deferred maintenance, and that starts to kind of add up quite quickly, especially with school facilities. But I think it's exciting. And I think if you've gone by Metcalf and Howard Bishop, or if you haven't gone by, I highly suggest you do it. We have pumped $42 million plus into 2 blocks in East Gainesville. And these schools look great. They're going to be state of the art. They offer high quality education. I mean, Metcalf is a B-rated school right now, and we have a strong principal leader there, and the teachers are doing great. And now they're going to have this gorgeous facility next to another gorgeous middle school. And then there's a public park in the center. And I think that this is a good way to just pump new life into that area. But I do think also what we're offering is going to matter. And so one of the things that we're trying to get started is actually we want to pilot a STEAM whole school magnet at Metcalf. And that school is going to focus on preparing students to go into Howard Bishop, where Howard Bishop has their tech program. And then we see that then transferring off to what we want to do at CTE, or what we would expect a student who would maybe wants to go the Cambridge route or IB or a traditional high school model. That we're kind of looking at our education system from kindergarten, perhaps even pre-K, all the way up to 12. And to be honest, past that, I'm looking at P20. And so I think these are things that we can do that are exciting. I think people can get into it. I know that I have people from the community, as far as the chamber and the university and Santa Fe, who's excited about being able to engage our public schools. So I think we have that. We're also looking at a dual language immersion whole school magnet, where what we have is, in the dual language immersion, I'm learning a lot about all of this these days, is that we have half the population are native speakers. And this one that we're looking at piloting is Spanish speakers. And then the other half of the population is English. And they would start in kindergarten, where half of the curriculum is taught in Spanish and half is in English. And so by the time your child is through school, you are going to have a bilingual as well as literal child. And so now you're going to have adults entering the workforce who now speak 2 languages fluently. And can you imagine what that could do for our community? We have other magnet programs that currently exist that all I want to do is, let's talk about stretching it. Can every kid in that building have access to that education? Why not? I mean, I think it would be exciting to have that type of exposure for everyone. So I think these are the conversations that I'm hoping that we will be able to have in these listening sessions, is to talk about what we can do. We have some ideas that we're already working on, but we also want to make sure that we're getting feedback from the community. I will say all of these ideas that we are currently working on came from the community. They're just people who, started kind of throwing ideas out, and we started to explore them. And so, that's kind of where I am, I think, right now, unless you guys have more questions. And so,
Well, thank you so much. I know that Jackie is monitoring the comments that have come into YouTube. Are there any others that you think should be asked of any of our panelists? Jackie?
Sorry, there were a couple questions about the whole magnet school. Like, are you going to take into account will the magnet school reflect the racial makeup of our county, is one question. Currently they don't. And then there were questions about busing. Will busing be used to fill those schools that are not filled to capacity? And what are the effects of busing children long distance? Those are a few of the questions.
so what I would like to propose to the community, and I would like us to discuss, is ways of making the magnets reflect the economic proportions of our community. And so we kind of make sure that we have some distribution that's balanced, that reflects the city we live in. And I think there's ways we can do it. And I think it's something that we need to address. Now, so because not all of our neighborhoods have that type of distribution that would reflect what's going across the county, I think that there's, what I'm also interested in and I would like to discuss, is a concept called cluster zoning. And this is something that happens in, like, Boston has it. I know Nashville has it. I want to say Seminole County in Florida does it as well. And so the basic premise of cluster zoning is, so I live in my house, but I'm not zoned for one elementary school. I'm zoned for like 4 or 5, depending on how we work this all out. And based on my child, my interests, I have an option of going to one of these 4 or 5 elementary schools, and I would treat it almost like the magnet where you apply. And I think in Boston Public, you're guaranteed one of your top 3. So you may not get your first choice, but you have your other 2 choices, and they'll make sure it happens. And so, and this is what I like about the whole school magnets, because not everybody wants to have a dual language immersion experience for their child. Somebody might want, and Montessori is something I would be interested in us looking at, but we haven't started on that discussion yet, but I am interested in Montessori, just honestly. But somebody might want a Montessori as opposed to a STEAM education. And so what I'm trying to do, and what I think would be interesting, is looking at providing choice and balance in this rezoning effort. Parents want choice, we all do. It's important for us to feel as though that school is aligning with our value systems in whatever shape they happen to be in. And so I think that we can actually come up with some solutions to meet both. How do we redistribute our population in our schools, but also allow people to have some choice? And I do think that there's some good examples across the country that we can look at to explore. And those are things that we would be talking about in our listening sessions. That then goes into the transportation. Transportation matters. I mean, gosh, accessibility is huge. I mean, this goes into something I said earlier, access to schools, healthcare, workforce, grocery stores. Like, this is a thing. And so we need to look at transportation as what can the school system do, but I'd say we also need to talk about transportation. What can the county do? What can the city do? And what does that look like? And I can't remember your last question. Sorry.
I think you covered everything
Okay.
that came up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Wow.
much. And
Yes. Sorry, Jackie. Continue.
no, you go ahead, Dr.
Okay.
Simmons. I'm so impressed with all of our panelists. This
Me
has really
too.
exceeded my expectations. Everyone's done such a great job.
Absolutely. And so let me just wrap up by thanking all of our panelists and thanking you, Dr. Simon, for being our guest and so open to addressing the concerns of our parents as well as the community concerns that were posted on YouTube. For everybody, this is being recorded, so it will be on YouTube. Please share this with folk who were not able to make it. Thank you again for coming. Thank you to our sponsors, the Alachua County NAACP, the Racial Justice Task Force of the United Church of Gainesville, the Gator chapter, UF chapter of the NAACP, and the African American African American History Task Force. We used to be called the Black History Task Force. So, but our new name is the African American History Task Force. Thanks to everyone who came, and thank you all again for being such wonderful panelists. Good night.